Hey guys, welcome to another video here on the Aviation Pro channel. In today's video we're going to take a look at the Captain Sim Boeing 767-300ER for Prepared. Now Captain Sim has released this aircraft as an early access model. You can already get it from the Captain Sim website for $99.76. And this is actually a discounted price from the normal price they charge for this aircraft, $134.99. So in this review we'll just explore the different aspects of the aircraft. We'll take a look at the exterior and interior. Of course we'll take a look at all the cockpits and systems and the customizations that you can do. And we'll also take a look at the documents that come with the add-on, including the aircraft configuration editor. And then I'll conclude the video to say whether this aircraft is worth it. Now before we move on to the review, just a short word from today's video sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by RDPresets. RDPresets is a company that's all about enhancing the performance and the looks of your flight simulator. On their website you can find various guides for both Prepared and Explain in order to get the most out of your system. And depending on your specifications of your system, you can tune the flight simulator in order to get the best performance and looks out of your sim. And actually they have just released the Prepared version 5 guide. So version 5, of course, a pretty new simulator allowing you to fine-tune that version. They've also developed presets for PTA and tomato shade in order to get the most realistic look in your flight simulator. On their website you can also find RDPresets Autogen in order to improve the looks of Autogen in your sim, and they also provide liveries and other mods. So make sure you check them out over at rdpresets.com. Now I know there's always kind of a discussion surrounding Captain Sim in the flight sim community about the prices they charge for their add-ons and different packages for the different add-ons that you can get, and expansion packages for engine models, etc. And I agree, I think the prices for their add-ons are quite steep.
Steep? It's effing vertical!
And this is especially true if you already got the 757 that they've recently made. Nevertheless, I'm going to review this 767 as it is, as a standalone product, and I'll conclude the video whether to assess whether the price is worth it. But personally for me the 767 is really a nostalgic aircraft. It really takes me back to my early flight sim career, because I started my flight sim career with the Level D Boeing 767-300ER in FS 2004. And frankly the Captain Sim Boeing 767 in Prepared brings back a lot of memories, a lot of good memories about the 767, and that's a good point, I would say. Overall I really enjoyed my experience with the Boeing 767 by Captain Sim, so without further ado, let's just review it. Now do keep in mind that I've reviewed this aircraft in Prepared version 5. I'm currently switching to the new sim. I don't have version 4 installed anymore, so I had to review it in version 5. It's officially not released for version 5 yet, but it will be made available later. So there are some small items that might be affected by this, and if so I will mention that in the video, and I of course will not judge those items in that case. Let's take a look at the exterior first. Now of course Captain Sim is well known for putting a lot of detail and effort in their exterior models, and that's absolutely the same with this 767. They've really done a great job at modeling the exterior. Really smooth animations, great texturing quality, great use of PBR in the new sim. It just looks amazing. Now the aircraft only comes with one model at the moment, unfortunately. It models the Boeing 767-300ER with the Pratt & Whitney engines, and I do kind of miss that. I do wish they would have included the other engine types like General Electric and a Rolls-Royce in the base package, especially for the original price that they charge for $134. But anyway, as you can see, it looks very nice. A lot of effort went into this, so let me just show you some liveries. Here's a Delta livery. As you can see, you can turn off and on the winglets if you like. For example, here's a Martinair livery with an old airline that unfortunately doesn't fly anymore. And the liveries just look very nice on this airplane. It's definitely a beauty. You can definitely see they put a lot of detail in the exterior texturing, and the reflections that you see at night, for example, as well, is just beautiful. As you can see, here's the American model during daylight, and then when we switch to night you can definitely see the great reflections also on the wing surface, you know, of the different lights. It just looks amazing. It generally feels sometimes like you sit in the actual aircraft as a passenger, so that's definitely a very good sign. So in general you won't be disappointed by the exterior model. Let's take a look at the customizations that you can do from within the sim. Now as you can see, there's a bunch of customizations that you can do. You can really open up all the doors, all the Slides can be popped out of the aircraft, and there's just a lot of detail. As you can see, I'm opening up all the items that are on the list through this little tool that you can open from within the sim. You can simply open up all the doors and turn on any of the lights inside and outside the aircraft, including also the external power and the external air and stuff like that. So as you can see, a lot of customization that you can do. So you can really, for example, get this aircraft in some sort of super cold and dark state, and then slowly close every single door and then start up the airplane from there. And again, in general, there's just a lot of effort went into the animations and the smoothness of the animations and the detail. As you can see, let's take a look at the gear here. You can simply, very well do a walk around with this aircraft and really inspect all the different items that you would also do in the real world. So you can definitely see they put a bunch of detail in the landing gear, for example, or something like the APU inlets and also the engines. You can open up the engine cowlings and take a look and inspect the engines that way. So if you're into that, it's really great fun to explore the 767 from the outside. And just to demonstrate the animations, here's the gear coming down on the Iceland Air Boeing 767. And as you can see, it's really smooth. You can definitely see all the different details of the landing gear, all the different struts and springs that you can see. So in general, very well done. It really provides for a cinematic experience. When during cruise time, for example, you can just explore the aircraft from the outside very well. So now that we've explored the outside, let's go ahead inside and explore the flight deck, and it's just beautiful. Again, Captain Sim did a really nice job here on the cockpit, and I know, maybe if you're a 757 user, it probably looks pretty similar. But I'm reviewing this as a standalone product. I only own the 767 at the moment, and I just really like the cockpit. They really put a lot of effort into the texturing, the modeling of the cockpit, and it looks very genuine, like you would expect from a Boeing 767-300ER. So it's very, very nice. As you can see, they put a lot of detail in it. The displays are very crisp. You can actually adjust the resolution of the displays and also the refresh rate of the displays in order to customize it to your liking. I simply put it to the highest values at the moment, and as you can see, it provides for a nice look. And it's just really well done. There's a lot of 3D objects. All the knobs and switches are 3D, as you would expect these days with the virtual cockpit. And overall, I'm just really positively surprised by the looks of the cockpit. Generally, takes me back to that 767 feeling that I had in the Level D Boeing 767 in FS 2004, but a lot better. So that aircraft still had a 2D overhead panel, so I'm very glad that I can finally fly a Boeing 767 with a full 3D panel. Anyways, as you can see, it just looks beautiful. Here are some of the details, as you can see. So the animations that you can also find in the cockpit are decent. When you press the knobs and switches, they move nicely. Not much to say about that. But also inside the aircraft, you can do a lot of customizations. You can adjust the seats, you can move the armrests, move the seats back and forth, things like that. You can open up the sun blinds in order to block out the sun from the outside if you want to. You can click on the chart and it will remove the chart thingy if you want to, and also the coffee mug, things like that. Captain Sim is well known for putting a lot of animations inside the cockpit. You can also open up the windows, as you can see. I personally really like that. If you have an aircraft that is able to open up the windows in real life, then you should also be able to do that in Flight Sim, in my opinion. So that's definitely a great feature. Now the aircraft also comes with so-called glass, or GLACS. It's like the Captain Sim's Rainmaker, so you can see the raindrops on the windshield. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to work in Prepared version 5, but I know that it is included in the add-on. So you will have raindrops, and the wipers will actually work if you are going to be flying this aircraft in Prepared version 4. And I'm sure that they will take a look at this when they officially release the aircraft for Prepared version 5. Because again, I'm reviewing it in version 5, but it's not officially supported for version 5 yet. Now the only thing I don't really like personally about the interior, it's not very big items. The sounds, they could be a bit more advanced. There are sounds behind the knobs and the switches, but it's not like the level of which, for example, PMDG has done it. It doesn't seem like the different knobs and switches have different sounds every time. I do kind of miss this electrical clunk sound when you switch the generators, things like that. They could have put a little bit more effort into that, in my opinion, but in general it's nice. What I do like is that you really hear this this kind of this 400 hertz electrical tone in the 767. If you ever watch real world cockpit videos from the 767, you definitely notice this constant tone in the background of the electrical systems, and you hear that in this flight deck as well, so that kind of adds to the 767 experience. And what I personally don't really like about the cockpit is the MCP dials. It's the same style that they've kept for many years with VATSIM, and I just wish they would have improved that a little bit. That you can actually see these digits jump as you turn the heading knob or the altitude knob, for example. You don't really see that right now. It's just kind of a texture change. So in my opinion, it would be great if they kind of put some time into the MCP and just rework these dials. It really adds to that classic MCP feeling that you have with the 767. So in general, I'm really pleasantly surprised with the flight deck that they've modeled. I think they've done a good job. And let's take a look at what the flight deck looks like at night. And I think it looks amazing. It's really well done. I can definitely see they put a lot of effort into creating the atmosphere at night as well, which is really important. As you can see, there's just you have the classic brownish flight deck look of the 767 portrait at night. And yeah, just take a look for yourself. As you can see, it's quite amazing. Lovely details in the lights, and there's not much to say about it. You just have to look and experience it for yourself, and you can definitely see that it just creates a very nice atmosphere in the cockpit. And flying this aircraft into the sunset and during the night is just a very pleasant experience. Now, the only negative about the night cockpit is that you cannot adjust the lights in the cockpit. You can adjust the floodlights and also the chart and the map lights. As you can see, you can switch those knobs in order to adjust the brightness of the floodlights, basically. But the other lights, the cockpit lights and that you see behind the overhead panel and the digits of the MCP, it can only be turned on with one knob. Well, actually you can use multiple knobs, but they all do the same thing. They just turn on the backlight of all those instruments and panels. So that's a bit of pity. Those are not dimmable. Also, you cannot turn on the overhead panel separately. For example, you cannot turn on the the main panel, the MCP or the pedestal separately. That's only possible for the floodlights, but not for the backlights. And with a professional add-on, I kind of did not expect this. That's a bit of a pity. Nevertheless, it looks great. In practice, you will probably turn those different backlights on anyway. Otherwise you won't be able to see the overhead panel at light. But it just would be nice that they are at least adjustable in some way, so you can really adjust it to your liking. So that's a really kind of a negative that I see with the flight deck interior at night. But in general, it just looks beautiful, and you can also see the lights during daylight, so that's nice. You can just turn on the panel lights and the floodlights during day as well, so you can easily transition into sunset or sunrise. Now normally I would also show kind of what the landing and taxi lights look like, but they don't seem to work very well in Prepared version 5 yet, so I'm just going to leave that out for now. But just know that in the aircraft configuration editor you can actually change the landing light and taxi light intensity in there. So I'm just going to leave that out for now. And the aircraft also comes with a virtual cabin. At first I thought I would find it in the interior, but actually it's on the exterior. You can only see the virtual cabin if you look at it from the exterior. So if you use something like chase plane, you can simply hover to that location. And this is kind of what it looks like. Yeah, it's not very pretty. It's just kind of basic model of the cabin. Personally, I'm not really in favor of this. I don't really, see any added value in adding this cabin to the exterior model. Because you cannot really sit in a seat. If you put your camera in a seat, for example, the textures and models just kind of blend away, because if you get too close with the camera, you cannot see the textures anymore. So yeah, I just don't really, personally, I'm not really a fan of it. But if you like it, just know it's there. And yeah, you can just get some nice wing views from that location, of course, if you want to. So it does help to adjust with the view for the wing view. So let's go ahead and take a look at the cockpit and systems of the Captain Sim Boeing 767. The best way to do this is probably by simply making a flight. So I'm going to make a flight from Zurich to Budapest with the TUI Netherlands livery, as you can see. And I'm just going to start the aircraft up, go through the systems, and then we'll explore along the way the positives and the negatives in regards to the cockpits and systems of the add-on. Now overall I can say I'm quite positive about what they have simulated. It's really quite solid, but there are some small items that I would really like to see fixed when this aircraft officially fully releases out of beta. First of all, let's take a look at the FMC and the options and the setup that you can find there. It's not very advanced. You won't find a bunch of options like you would find in PMDG aircraft, unfortunately, so there's not a lot of customization that you can do from within the flight management system. But however, you can actually set up the passenger payload and the fuel. So you can just do that through this menu. We can just enter a percentage, enter a 0 fuel weight, or distribute the cargo and the payload yourself more accurately. As you can see, there are some options out there that allow you to customize some items, but there are only very little, just small items, unfortunately. You can also perform some actions, like for example calling up the jetway or requesting a pushback. So some of those small items are in there. So that's about it. Now you can also load up the panel state and save a panel state. That's of course very nice. So what I'm going to do is load up the default cold and dark startup state, and then start the aircraft up for its flight. So as you can see in here, the aircraft has fully established in its cold and dark state, and I'm just going to turn on the battery and the standby power. Basically all the systems that you can find on the overhead panel are well simulated. Nothing much to say about this. I didn't find any problems actually with the hydraulics or the electrics or the packs, for example. It all performs as expected, as you would expect in any kind of Boeing aircraft. And if you have some Boeing experience, this aircraft will not be that much different. So I'm just going to start up all the systems one by one, and yeah, again, it just performs as you would expect. Now I'm not sure in how much detail this simulates really the hydraulic fluid movement and fuel movement, all that kind of stuff. PMDG, for example, is quite well known for putting a lot of detail in the background simulation. But yeah, I don't really know about this add-on. I've not really read that from the product page, to what degree they simulate that. But in principle, all the systems that you can find on the overhead panel are well simulated. One little detail that you can find on the overhead panel is the the call up buttons. Normally in real life you would use that to actually call up a part of the cabin crew and part of the aircraft. But in this case it actually plays an announcement, so you can kind of play around with that if you want.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a routine procedure that we dim our cabin lights for night takeoff.
So here I am starting up the flight management system, just aligning up the IRS. Of course you can also put in a fast or a realistic alignment time in the options, so that's very nice. And I'm just going to program in the route for this flight. So as you can see, I'm just programming in my route here. If you just have a Navigraph subscription, for example, it just loads the new data fine. I didn't really find any problems actually with programming the flight management system. It works as expected, as you would expect from any Boeing aircraft. Now the 767 is a little bit different here and there, especially with the, for example, the engine thrust rating is a bit different to set up. So there will be some differences from your regular 737 or maybe 777. It's a pretty old aircraft actually, the 76. So it's fun to discover those differences. But yeah, they've done a great job at simulating those differences and actually making it true to the actual 767. So here I'm putting in the performance data. From what I've experienced in the few flights that I've made, the performance works well. It behaves as expected. If you load, for example, or make a flight plan using SimBrief, the fuel, for example, the fuel burn and the values that you get in the FMC actually, line up pretty well with the SimBrief profile that's in there. Of course, this can be probably fine-tuned by SimBrief, but overall it really just performs as you would expect, luckily. Same for the V speeds, you can just set a reduced thrust takeoff, a trim setting. I've calculated using TopCat for the 767 similar speeds, and it came actually pretty close to the speeds that were calculated in the flight management system. So overall they've done a good job at programming the entire flight management system, I must say, and I'm really happy with that. The only real big downside that I currently have, and I hope it's going to be fixed in the eventual full release, is that there's no way to upload wind data. And my personal opinion, if you have add-ons currently available like Active Sky and also other flight planning tools that come up with a bunch of wind data, if you're making a medium to long haul jet like the 767, it's really essential that you have the availability to uplink this data. Of course, you do not have to simulate the entire Aicraft system, but I really miss the wind uplink at the moment. So I'm not sure if they're going to include that in the final release. I really do hope so, but if they do, then this flight management system will be complete. The only way you can actually enter wind data right now is by manually putting it into the route data page for each waypoint or for a couple of waypoints along your route. So it's a bit of a hassle, especially if you're making a long haul flight or across the Atlantic. You just want to have that accurate wind data in there, and the latest wind data from Active Sky, for example. So that's really rather unfortunate, so I really hope that they're going to include this in the final release. So that's basically it for the flight management system. Now overall, I'm really pleasantly surprised with how the aircraft works. It really seems to perform as nicely. All the knobs and switches perform as expected, except for the nav radios. I'm not really sure, on the 767 you actually find this one on the the glare shield, so you can actually tune the nav radios from there, and that's quite unique for this aircraft. Now they do not really behave as I expect. Normally you would be able to manually tune a VOR, and then put in a course and then switch back to auto, and then when you switch back to manual again, in that case you would get the original frequency that you put in. But that doesn't happen on the Captain Sim 767, so it's something they have to look at. But anyway, it's not a really big issue. So it's about time to start up the engines. Here I'm just preparing the aircraft for engine start, and again it just works as expected. And the PAC system on the 767 is usually a little bit more complicated. You need to take a little bit more careful look at it, especially which isolation switches have been turned on or off, otherwise the system doesn't work. But as you can see, we can turn the PACs on. You can also hear in the background that you can hear the PACs starting up. And overall the start sequence performs as expected again. So let's start up those engines. So now that the engines have started up, we can slowly get going and prepare all the systems for departure. Again, it's an old aircraft, so there are some small differences, especially when you're used to flying the 777, for example. So that's quite fun. Now overall, you can just manage, for example, the displays very nicely. You can turn on the airports, the waypoints, things like that. You can just show that on the navigation display. It also comes with a terrain display and also a weather radar. However, I'm not using the weather radar in this video due to Active Sky not completely working yet with Prepared version 5 at the moment of recording this video. But anyway, all the options are in there, so you don't have to worry about that. So let's get going. We're ready for taxi, and we'll taxi to runway 34 at Zurich Airport for our departure to Budapest, and we'll just see how the LNAV and the VNAV system perform, and let's take a closer look. So as you can see, we're lining up for departure. LNAV has been armed, and what's really interesting about the 767 is that you do not really press the TOGA switch. The TOGA is kind of only a go around switch on this aircraft, so that's quite fun. We actually advance the throttles here and then push the thrust button on the MCP in order to get the throttles to take off thrust. When you put the throttles to take off thrust, you have to kind of mess with your hardware throttles, because it does tend to follow the hardware throttles even when the auto throttle system has been activated. So best is just to put your hardware throttles full forward, and then the auto throttle of the Captain Sim Boeing 767 will adjust in order to set the appropriate takeoff thrust. Without further ado, let's listen to the takeoff. So as you can see, we've departed, and overall the flight director system and the LNAV and VNAV system seem to work properly, I found. There are maybe some small items that we'll take a look at later. The display refresh rate in this takeoff clip was set to high, one level below the highest setting. I did find that was a bit, especially at this quite complex airport, it was a bit low for comfort. So I had some trouble following the flight directors properly. But just as a comparison, I made another takeoff using the highest setting for the refresh rate, and that was actually better. I really like to have the high refresh rate on the displays, even in low frame rate conditions, so that you can actually properly fly the aircraft. Otherwise it tends to get even more difficult when the frame rates of the displays get even lower. So putting it to the highest refresh rate is probably the best option. So switching back to the original departure, as you can see, we're in a nice turn here. I'm just following the flight directors, and again, I found that the performance as expected. I've flown multiple SIDs so far with this aircraft, haven't discovered huge issues. There's one moment during this departure where it does seem to kind of forget the LNAV route, not a huge deal. When I switched the range on the navigation display, it seemed to pick up the waypoint again. Yeah, and maybe a small item to fix, but you have to realize the automation systems in real-world aircraft actually do not always do what you want it to do either. So it's always there's always the task of properly monitoring the automation system. But during departure, I found that it really performed very nicely, and yeah, as expected. So yeah, really a well job done by Captain Sim in simulating the automation. But enough talk about automation, because I also want to talk about the hand flying, and I have to say the hand flying is really nice on this aircraft. It really feels like this big old jet that you're flying. The 767 does seem to be quite responsive, but apparently that's also the same case in real life. I also found that with the level D Boeing 767 in FS 2004, that it's quite a responsive aircraft on the controls. But it's very nice. The hand flying is really great, and landing is great fun with this aircraft, and it just feels very genuine somehow, so that's definitely a good sign. So it's time to set up the approach, and again, this works as expected. You can just select a star and an approach to a runway, and you can easily program that. Also the VNAV calculations do seem to be working properly, also with the speed for the VREF, for example. Again, you have to tune the ILS here on the pedestal for the separate ILS tuner, including putting in the correct course inbound to the runway. So yeah, that's pretty nice. So as you can see, we are approaching our top of descent right here, and the aircraft will does seem to pick up the VNAV path properly. It did come with the drag required message immediately, but I kind of ignored that because that probably was not really necessary at this moment. But overall, I found throughout the descent the VNAV system actually performed very well. As you can see here, we're making a turn, and yeah, we're still on the VNAV profile. It follows it very nicely even when making the turn and flying to the next waypoint. Now sometimes there are these little VNAV hiccups where it suddenly thinks it's too high or too low. I'm not sure how this relates to the aircraft in real life. I bet it happens in real life sometimes as well. Something you just have to kind of keep an eye on so that the aircraft doesn't do what you don't want it to do. As you can see here, the VNAV path suddenly thinks that we're way too high. and it starts to kind of nosedive. So it's something to take care of and make sure that you monitor. But again, I'm not sure really how this can be attributed to Captain Sim's effort in simulating the VNAV system. As you can see, it's kind of catching up. It's a bit jumping around. I'm not sure why it happened in this case. Maybe because of the winds. But as you can see, it kind of solved on its own, and not really a big issue. But again, automation in real life is not perfect, so neither in the sim. So just make sure that you keep an eye on it. So as you can see, the approach that we're making is not super complex, just kind of a regular approach with some S-turns in order to align up with the center line for the ILS approach. And I have to say, throughout this approach procedure, the start that I've programmed and the transition, the aircraft performed really nicely. The automation really did a good job at following the path. At some point I took over manually, put in some manual inputs, something that would happen, when flying on VATSIM, for example. At some point you're going to get some instructions from ATC in order to fly a certain speed or a certain heading. And doing that using the automation actually worked very well. The aircraft did not freak out when I entered some manual values, so that's really good. Now, just to show off the cockpit a little bit again, I'm just going to switch the time, as you can see here during the approach. And yeah, it just looks beautiful, this kind of this orange brown old cockpit, lighting up in this dark sky with all the beautiful street lights below. It just adds to the atmosphere. It's really what I like about this classic airplane, and Captain Sim has done a great job at simulating that and providing for this great atmosphere in the cockpit. Just look for yourself. I think it looks quite amazing. So as you can see, we're in the final stages of the approach. In this case, I switched to flight level change, but it's still on LNAV. As you can see, rather sharp turn. It follows it very nicely, really well done. And I'm just going to descend to the approach altitude for the ILS approach. And then we'll just arm the approach mode and see how the aircraft will capture the ILS. So as you can see here, I'm turning to final. I'm still on LNAV, and then I'm gonna engage the localizer mode in order to capture the localizer. I'm capturing the glide slope slightly from above. That's entirely my own mistake. Something you would not prefer to do in real life, of course. But anyway, right here we are, kind of descending, and in a few moments it will capture the glide slope and follow it accordingly. But as you can see, it performs these kind of turns nicely. There's no major hiccups or anything that you would not expect the aircraft to do. Some add-on aircraft tend to kind of get jumpy in these kind of complex situations, but overall I think it performed very, very nicely and behaves as expected, so that's a really good sign. So as you can see here, the aircraft is capturing the glide slope, and I'm now going to reduce the speed further for the final approach speed and then deploy the flaps on schedule. As you can see on the speed tape, the little F symbols tell you when to put down the flaps, and that seems to work properly. Now the aircraft follows the ILS nicely, as you would expect. As you can see, it's really nicely managing the glide slope and also the localizer, and I did not find any problems here. But of course, the hand flying is very important, and I do love hand flying the 767. So I'm just going to disconnect the automation shortly and go for a manual landing. So let's go ahead and land the 767. There's one little issue when landing and flying an ILS approach. You get some sort of caution and an autopilot disconnect caution. This should not happen actually. I'm just flying manually right now. But for some reason it gives this caution message when it kind of loses track of the ILS signals. So this is just a little bug fix that they have to fix. But overall, again, hand flying is just great. It's really stable in approach. It feels genuine, and yeah, let's just take a look at how it performs.
Minimums. 100. 50, 40, 30, 20, 10.
So there we go, we have landed the 767. Again, just really nice. You really feel when you are touching down with those gears. And again, yeah, you will have to experience for yourself how you like the hand flying. Personally, I just love it. Also, you know, taxiing on the ground, vacating runway goes smoothly. Yeah, not much to say about it. The steering tiller performs as you would kind of expect for a relatively big jet like the 767. So let's kind of start putting a conclusion to this video. First of all, by looking at the performance. Now the performance is quite well. I did notice it is a little bit heavier than, you know, for example, a PMDG aircraft. It seems like the aircraft is using more heavier textures, and this is especially noticeable when you switching from inside to outside. Now maybe if you have very fast memory and you know, an SSD, this of course will probably work better. But for me, you know, especially when moving in and outside of the cockpit, the textures are quite heavy to load. So I think they will also come with some sort of light version, you know, lighter texture pack in order to solve that. But overall, the frame rates do seem to be okay. Maybe a little bit lower than your regular PMDG aircraft, but nothing that you should worry about. As you can see, the performance here at Budapest, you know, kind of a medium-sized airport, is pretty nice. Now, of course, the aircraft also comes with a configuration editor. In the configuration editor, you can do various things. You can select the different models. You can download online liveries. You can select whether you want to have winglets on your aircraft or not. Of course, there's only one engine variant available at the moment, unfortunately, but in the future, we'll probably be able to select other engine variants as well. You can adjust the refresh rate of the displays and the resolution of the displays, which is very nice. And also on the outside, on the exterior, you can decide what kind of antennas you want to have on the aircraft. Again, a lot of detail, of course, for the exterior model in the Captain Sim Boeing 767. Now the aircraft also comes with some manuals, just you know, a bunch of pages to get you going with the 767. Not much to say about that. It's just really nice that they provide that with the add-on. Of course, that's very essential for a complex aircraft like this. So you will have plenty of time to read and explore this aircraft. And a short word on the future of this aircraft. They are going to work on other models, of course, the engine variants, probably the 767-200 and also the freighter as well. There was also a poll on the forum about whether people wanted the 767-400, which is quite different from you know, this version. Has a more modern kind of 777 style cockpit. So yeah, they are working on those kind of things, so you can expect more models in the future, which is very nice. But I just hope it won't be too expensive. So let's put a conclusion to the review of the Captain Sim Boeing 767. In general, I really like it. I think I've done a great job. It really does provide me with a nice representation of what the 767 would feel and look like in real life. Again, it's a rather old airplane, and compared to the 777 and the 787, you definitely notice the differences, and it's really nice to work with that in this simulation. Now, of course, the big question, is it worth the price? Especially, you know, we kind of have a discounted price right now, and the full price will be $135. And I think for the current price of about $99, I think yes, it's worth it. You know, where Captain Sim kind of lacks in some of the advanced features like wind uplink or failure simulation, or easy key command assignments, or you know, advanced FMC options. You know, they do put a lot of effort in the exterior model. The question is though, you know, as a flight simmer, how much are you going to actually look at things like the emergency slides being open, or the weather radar dome on the nose of the aircraft being open? You know, personally, I don't really look at the exterior model that much at all. So personally, I would rather like, you know, would have liked it better if they put a bit more effort into a little bit more advanced system simulation, maybe including some failures, but especially things like key assignments and wind uplink. You know, those are kind of essential for me personally. So I think for the current price it's worth it, but it's a bit steep for the price that they would originally charge. That is, if they are going to keep it this way. If they're going to include more of the engine models, then I do think it's worth it, because I do think the $135 price is worth it, because they did put a lot of effort in the exterior model, so we should not, of course, discount that. And overall, it's a good and solid simulation. There are no major hiccups, and I really enjoyed flying. It's just those little things like wind uplink or failure simulation that you won't get with this add-on. But again, if they're going to charge, you know, even more for just an engine variant, which, for example, in PMDG aircraft is already included in most of the base packages, yeah, I'm just not sure if that's really worth the price in that case. But of course, I really leave that up to you to decide. Now, if you really like the 767, then this is definitely the best choice out there. So thanks for watching this review here on the AviationPro channel. I hope you have a kind of a good impression what this add-on looks like and feels like. And again, I just really like it overall, and hope you can kind of form your own opinion this way. Again, just stay tuned on the channel. I don't upload that many videos anymore. I know, I'm just very busy with real life flight training as well. I just want to wish you, good health in these times, and of course, make sure that you enjoy flight simming now you can. So take care, and see you again soon.